Time passes, people move. Like a river's flow, it never ends. A childish mind turns to noble ambition, and I'll keep exploring bizarre rabbit holes in video games. Back in the mid-2000s, Thomas Bolton was the undisputed king of Mario Kart DS, holding multiple world records, the champion distinction, and being virtually untouchable in online play. In 2007, that would change, however, as a relatively unknown player named NTT West Japan would challenge Thomas to a match across all 20 online tracks, where he decisively beat the champion and then disappeared from the community. A year later, he resurfaced, and Thomas challenged him to another match, but NT didn't seem to have the competitive edge he had before, with Thomas winning handily, but some players had suspicions that NT was cheating, and if we go a bit deeper, we see evidence that suggests this NT wasn't the one Thomas faced back in 2007. Today we'll be exploring the unsolved controversy that rocked the Mario Kart DS community and try to figure out if NT was a skilled player, a cheater, or multiple people assuming an identity, and what this fake Rainbow Road world record has to do with it all. Get your mining goggles on, this rabbit hole is deep. Looking at the timeline of NT's activity, we see that he first came onto the scene in mid-2006, as there were some mentions of him in forum threads from Japan. In early 2007, we see that Thomas played an online match with two other well-known Japanese players, with NT being in the game as well. B-Dash and Sun Wolsey were among the best players in the world, and NT couldn't quite hang with three top contenders, earning a third, fourth, and fourth. His skill was estimated at above average, and there was a large and noticeable gap between him and Thomas, but what he lacked in skill, he made up for in knowledge. If we look at the GotchiSure forums where players posted strategies and theories, we see that not only was NT active, but he had a high-level knowledge of multiple tracks, including technical explanations of Wario Stadium. This brings us to April 2007, just 4 months after Thomas and NT's first match. In their previous meeting, NT's record was 225 wins and 7 losses, which is good, but not amazing when compared to the other racers involved. And over the last 4 months, NT's record had improved to 572 wins and 61 losses. Scoring in MKDS works a bit differently, as you're awarded win points for finishing ahead of other players and get loss points for finishing behind someone. This meant you could spam races against lower skilled players and get a huge ratio for your win-loss record. In August, a player named Mander contacted Thomas by YouTube DM and said that NT wanted to play in a 1 vs 1 all 20 tracks match. There's no video of this meeting, but Thomas recalls that he was decisively beaten, with the final score being 12 or 13 matches in NT's favor. This was a huge shock to everyone, as the best players in the world weren't able to beat Thomas in a Grand Prix match, let alone an all 20 track contest, with B-Dash noting that NT seemed to be inhuman, never missing a mini turbo and never making a mistake. Not one to back down from a challenge, Thomas contacted Mander about a possible rematch with NT, but Mander replied he was off on a business trip to China and didn't know when NT would be back. Over the next few months, NT would post on the forums and participate in Japanese chat rooms, but in October, he ghosted the community entirely. Perhaps he really was a businessman that did frequent trips to China, but 7 months later, in April of 2008, he would resurface. Thomas heard he was in a chat room, and wanting another shot at the only player to defeat him, they set up a second match, and this time, there is video proof. Given that this was shot 16 years ago, the quality isn't the greatest, so I'll be using reconstruction footage where appropriate. Across the 12 races they played, we see that Thomas won 8-4, a complete reversal of fortunes, but something about NT's performance was a bit odd. If we look at Mario Nitro Circuit, we see that Thomas maintained his PRB until the end of lap 2. PRB stands for Prolonged Rocket Boost, which is where you extend the starting boost off the finish line by doing perfect mini turbos. It can be done infinitely, but sometimes the design of the track makes that impossible or very difficult, especially on Mario Circuit Nitro. On this track, the PRB for all 3 laps was only recently developed by Thomas while NT was supposedly on hiatus, and more importantly, Thomas was the only person skilled enough to pull it off at the time. During the race, as soon as Thomas dropped his PRB, NT was directly on his heels and overtook him, which leaves 2 possibilities. He was practicing the game and keeping up with recent strategies while not interacting with the community, or he was using a cheat code. Mario Kart DS doesn't show the charge particles of your opponent when they're drifting for mini turbos, so by using an action replay device, you can activate a code that fully charges a mini turbo the instant you start one. Since the particles aren't visible to opponents, this method of cheating cheating was masked by the game itself, and in addition to letting you set up good race lines from any angle, it also made it easier to perform a PRB. Not knowing if your opponent is cheating can be frustrating, but one thing that shouldn't be frustrating is your meal prep, and this video's sponsor Factor can help with that. Factor are no prep meal kits that fit a variety of diets, from keto, low calorie, vegan, vegetarian, all the way to high protein, and the best part is, they're shipped fresh and not frozen. If you have a busy lifestyle, Factor is a fantastic choice since meals are ready in just 2 minutes. So if you're looking for a snack, the smoothies or keto shakes are a great option. And if you're ready for lunch or dinner, the chef quality meals take only 2 minutes in the microwave or oven with no cleanup or prep. If you're looking to avoid fast food and ordering in, Factor comes at a great price point and offers meals that are flexible to your nutritional needs, taking the guesswork out of eating well so you never have to succumb to the dark side and order food off of apps. Get 50% off your first Factor box and free wellness shots for life using my link. That means you can choose 2 free wellness shots from 3 available flavors for every order while you are an active subscriber. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code with your phone. And with that, let's get back to the Mario Kart mystery. The Mario Circuit PRB was just one instance. If we look at Wario Stadium, we see that NT took lines that were very bizarre. In this section, you regain the PRB by going over a boost ramp, then do 2 right-facing mini-turbos followed by a left to get on the best line possible. What's odd about NT's mini-turbos is that he did right, left, right, putting him on a worse line. Despite this, he came out of the section ahead of Thomas, which might indicate he was using the mini-turbo code to help correct his line faster. These are just PRB tracks which have specific lines for extending the trick, but NT showed skill on races where the PRB isn't viable as well. Delfino Square is one such course, as while the bridge may be flat in single player, when it's played online the bridge is up at an angle, meaning you can't carry a PRB due to the time you're in the air from the jump. This makes for a race full of tight turns, and in particular, Thomas noticed that NT would accelerate faster than normal coming out of the mud shortcut section. At the time, he thought it could be a strat that only NT knew about, but in hindsight, he thinks it could be indicative of the mini-turbo code at work. NT was so skilled at every track that it aroused suspicion among other members of the community, as it normally takes hours of dedication each day across several months to reach this level of skill across multiple races. Looking at NT's progression, we see he went from being an above-average player to world champion level in the span of about 4 months, then took a 6-month hiatus where he was supposedly keeping up with new strategies but not participating in the community and could keep pace with Thomas upon returning. Around this time, he also participated in some online tournaments for Japanese players, but didn't perform well, saying that the other players got better during his absence, and this is where things start to get strange. NT would leave without a word after his rematch with Thomas, but if we look at his in-game icon, we'll see something peculiar. If we compare this emblem to the one we saw in 2007, it's clear that it's slightly different, and there are a few possible explanations for this. The first is that he had a data issue and had to redraw the emblem, which is a possibility as he admitted to having one before his August 07 match. The second is that this was an imposter trying to capitalize on the mystique of the NT name by using cheats to face Thomas in another match. This is a big claim, and having a slightly different emblem isn't enough evidence to fully support it. But if we compare NT's racing record between 2008 and 2007, things get even weirder. Here are his records from 07, and here is his 08 record. Somehow, the loss column has a huge discrepancy. This can be explained by a data loss, but given that he said other players had gotten better and his tournament results weren't great, this record has reasons to be doubted. Looking at a website by Amaris, a Japanese player that created write-ups about notable MKDS players, we see he originally thought that NT was a cheater, as his record had almost 200 wins and no losses. But after playing him, he soon realized he was outclassed and declared NT to be unbeatable. The thread recounts the timeline we've already covered, but also brings up 2 interesting points. He was someone that foreigners love to impersonate, and he spoke fluent English. Amaris doesn't speak English as confirmed by other community members, so he can't actually make this claim, and we have no evidence of NT ever speaking English, so it's a safe bet that NT doesn't speak English, and when it comes to impersonators, we have direct evidence that this did occur on at least one occasion, and it's time we discussed possible identities of the 2008 NT. KCB is a player that had a weird fixation with the Japanese community to the point that he assumed the identity of a Japanese player in Mario Kart Wii and tried to pass himself off as the actual Samus-san. He admitted this to Thomas, and he even impersonated NT, which may have been what Amaris was mentioning on his website. Oddly enough, Casey would race against Thomas using cheats and was beaten handily by him despite having a clear advantage, which implies that anyone impersonating NT would still need to be a highly skilled player. However, Thomas has said that the matches he had with Casey while he was cheating were very similar to the ones he had with NT. The second he made a mistake, he was out of the match with no chance of winning, which could indicate that NT was using a mini turbo code. This seems to imply that Casey could be NT, but unfortunately, Casey doesn't speak Japanese and translation tools back then weren't great. And NT was noted for speaking very polite Japanese when he communicated, which brings us to our next potential candidate, Mander. Mander is the only person with a direct connection to NT, as he was the one that organized the first match between him and Thomas. But why is he thought to be a potential imposter? Aside from his connection as a liaison between NT and Thomas, there is evidence that he used codes in online play. In this screenshot, two things are notable. The first is that the map these players are playing on is a battle mode course, which wasn't available for online play, and the second is that Mander's name is in white. The only way you can select a battle map online is by using codes, and the color of your name is based on your location, with Japan having red. White, like battle maps, can only be displayed with the use of codes. The other players in this match were legit and had never been known to use codes, which leaves Mander as the prime suspect. And if we look into his history, we'll see why players became suspicious of him being the NT imposter. Mander has been playing Mario Kart games since Super Circuit came out, and he set multiple world records in it, some of which would still be record today. At the time they were set, players were suspicious of them for a few reasons. Obviously, they eclipsed other records of the time by a large margin, but the big reason is that they were set on emulator. The records appeared to be too good to be real, and given that a few of them haven't been beaten in the 20 years since they were set, Mander was either a god or something fishy was going on, with some players suspecting that he tasked the records and tried to pass them off as legit. If we look at Mander's 4845 on Shy Guy Beach set in 2004, we see it debuted some new strategies: ticking and zigzag MT. Ticking is a strat where you use a boost and bounce off of walls to keep the boost going longer, and ZZ MT is where instead of holding the D-pad in one direction to charge a mini turbo, you wiggle it back and forth. ZZMT is generally a TAS-only trick unless you shave down your D-pad. If you try it without the modification, the zigzags will have the cart go side to side. But in Mander's video, the ZZMTs look very symmetrical, which seems to indicate inhuman execution. The reason for this is that it was actually a TAS, as he would tell Hahe 7 years later that it was an old TAS time, which means we can safely discount Mander's other records, right? Well, not exactly. You see, the first TAS tools for Game Boy Advance were released on March 7th, 2005. This means Mander would have had to make his own TAS tools in order to create some of these times, and to this day, he maintains that they are legitimate. Which leaves two questions: were his records real, or did he create some of them with homemade TAS tools? If we look at Mander's presence in Mario Kart Wii, we see that in addition to setting world records, he was also one of the main record-keeping channels, and he was technically proficient at creating analytical software for the game. In the last video, I showed how Mander had created a tool that let him see the Wii ID for ghost files that were submitted to him, which is why he never posted any of Razor's cheated times that were sent under different aliases, as they all had the same Wii ID. But he also made software that let him play Mario Kart Wii remotely from his iPhone. Software analysis is a double-edged sword, however, and Mander was caught using rapid fire to achieve perfect wheelie inputs in his Moonview Highway run. But to this day, he maintains the time is legit, as well as his Super Circuit times, which brings us to Mario Kart DS. He didn't have a large presence in the game and wasn't a highly skilled player, but it's been established that he did have the technical knowledge to use codes. And bizarrely enough, in 2007, a Mario Kart DS record website was hacked and displayed phrases such as "Mander is God" and "Mander is handsome." Whether this was Mander is another story, but when it comes to him being NT, we have the following evidence. He was active in the DS community and was very skilled at other titles in the series. He knew how to write software and likely could use codes. He was caught cheating once before, although he insists the time is legit, and he's connected to NT as he was the liaison between him and Thomas. Another point about Mander is that he did deeply care about the Mario Kart communities despite his slip-up in Mario Kart Wii, as he would find new strategies and always acted respectfully to other players when communicating with them. In 2019, he was asked about NT and said he wasn't as good as him and that he didn't know anything about Borc. so unless he's keeping up a facade a decade later, he's likely not NT. But who is Borc? On May 19, 2009, a video was found of someone doing the Rainbow Road respawn shortcut 3 times in a row, which is a huge feat considering the trick is insanely hard and the current record only had a single hit. The run itself was shot with a camera pointed at a DS, and the driving wasn't indicative of a skilled player. However, they did hit the shortcut all 3 times. Unfortunately, after being proof called relentlessly in the comments, the video was privated, so only the people that saw it before it was removed have an account of it. One thing they noted about the run is that the lap time didn't flash when the fastest lap was completed, a possible indicator that this was a task being played back on the DS, which we'll talk about shortly. The context around this video is also a bit odd, as the first task videos of MKDasher were released just a few days prior to it being uploaded, so it's entirely possible that this video was created with tasks given that it was posted by someone with no history in the game. But it drove the community so insane that someone posted on a hacker forum requesting to have the channel compromised so they could recover the video. The Japan Borc account was only older than the video by a single day, and if you look at the channel info, it says that the Wi-Fi name is a secret, and the next action Borc took surprised everyone. He sent a video link to Thomas over YouTube DM, and it showed another Rainbow Road 3 out of 3, but this time it started by inserting the cartridge into the console. Why the person is wearing gloves and has set up a black cloth for this presentation is a mystery to this day, but we clearly see a Rainbow Road time before the camera pans down and a caption appears saying, "Sorry, an old name is not shown." The camera then moves off screen, and when it returns, it shows that Thomas is on this person's friend list. This wasn't a recent friend addition, however, as the icon on Thomas's profile is one he used at the end of 07 to the beginning of 08, the same time he was playing against NT, meaning Borc could possibly be NT. Thomas posted this video to the forum and came to the same conclusion. His name and emblem shown in the video matched when he played NT last, and even speculates that this could be Mander, as he was a rumored imposter. This action of posting to the forum would be costly, however, as Borc sent him a DM saying, "You betrayed me, the video is removed," but luckily it was saved. This is a bit odd, as a Japanese player named Alec would email Borc, who said he didn't read the English forums, but Thomas suspects he did read the forum, or someone told him about the post as the DM was sent not long after. On top of this, if the run isn't legit, whoever created it would have needed to know how to get a task onto a ROM and then place it in the cart seen in the video, which is possible with the use of a flash cart, but does require some special knowledge. Borc seems to be the most likely candidate for the NT we saw in 08, as he has the same name and emblem Thomas was using in that era saved on his DS and went out of his way to show it specifically to Thomas. It's also suspected that the third place name he was hiding when he didn't show his full Rainbow Road time rankings was NTT West Japan, as that would have given away the secret then and there. However, there are 2 reasons to doubt Borc being NT. The first is that in the lost Rainbow Road shortcut video, the players that did see it said the driving wasn't very good, and only the shortcuts themselves were lined up perfectly, and we know that NT was an above-average driver. The second is that the DS shown in the video is the same model that Mander used in a 2019 video he uploaded to Twitter, and if you want to get out your tinfoil hats, the theory would be that Mander was behind the Borc identity and NT in 2008, a double imposter, although this doesn't seem very likely. So, let's recap the possible identities. In the case of KCB, we have someone that was known for impersonating Japanese players, including NT, and he admittedly used cheats against Thomas, but Casey wasn't a great driver and didn't speak Japanese, so there's no way he made all of the documented posts showing fluent language skills. In the case of Mander, we have someone that was connected to NT and wanted him to race Thomas, used codes to change his name color and play battle maps online, likely has the technical knowledge to get a task onto a cartridge, and speaks Japanese. However, the big issue with Mander is that he wasn't a good driver and denies being NT to this day. This brings us to Borc, a player with no documented history in the game, claiming one of the hardest shortcut records just days after tasks started to appear. Not to mention that he already had Thomas added as a friend from the time period that NT was active. So, who was NT? Based on the evidence, my theory is that the 06 to 07 NT were the same person, and they may have cheated against Thomas. But due to the limitations of the DS hardware, it's almost impossible to say for certain. Given that there's so much mystique around the 08 NT and the Borc video, I think it's possible that this NT was an imposter, and I'd say it's more likely than not that they were. This leaves one thing left to consider. What does Thomas think? Thomas believes that NT was the same person in both of their heads-up matches, as in both encounters he used strategies and race lines that Thomas said were unique to NT. Whether he used hacks or not is another question, as he became a world record level player very quickly. The truth is, we may never know who NT really was, but let me know what you think down below, and who knows, maybe I'll get a DM from someone claiming to be NT with video proof. Or maybe Borc will finally release his first Rainbow Road shortcut video. For answers to that, you'll have to stay tuned to the next exciting episode of Abyssoft Z.